What's up, my creatives? Schmick Photography here, and we're going to be doing some editing today, so let's get into it. Okay, so we've got an image here of the lovely Katerina that I took a while ago. We're going to be focusing on this one mainly because I want to look at skin, most importantly. It's the one thing that I've been having trouble covering just because, well, in my streams anyway, because Twitch doesn't like the amount of skin on shots like these. But I think it's a really important thing to go over just because it gives you a chance to practice, it gives you a chance to deal with lots and lots of space, lots and lots of accurate and important editing. Because things like skin, it's ones where you do something too much repetition, it becomes really, really obvious. You don't do something enough, and there wasn't any point doing it in the first place. So I really, really do want to get into this. So anyway, we'll just go through my normal process. So we do have a great image already to start with, which makes things a lot easier. But as always, my first step is our frequency separation. So we just duplicate our main image 2 times, just with Control J. We have our base layer, which is going to be our colors. And the layer above that is going to be our detail or our textures. Okay, now for frequency separation, the idea is that we're going to create a scenario where our texture layer and our color layer combined create the image that we have right now. And that will allow us to then edit on 2 different planes of existence, really. We can edit our colors without affecting our textures, and we can edit our textures without affecting our colors. So with our color layer, all we want to do is we want to zoom in a bit. We are going to go to filter, blur, gouge, and blur. And we want to find a number, and it's going to be slightly different for different images that you take, just because of the amount of detail, how close you are to the subject, things like that. We want to find one where basically what's happening is we lose the detail in the skin and it just becomes color information. Okay, so I just want to push this so that the defined skin cells, little bumps, lines, things like that disappear. So for me, I'd go somewhere around here. So 5.6 feels good for me there. So obviously we can still see what's going on, but we don't have any specific detail whatsoever. Now that's our color layer. For our texture layer, we want to go to image, apply image. So we've got our source as our original image. We want to set our layer to our colors layer, and down to blending mode. And we're going to go down to subtract. There we go. Now what you essentially end up here with is like a high pass filter. We're just going to leave all the other details as they are. And this basically is just giving us our sharp areas, our details themselves, and our textures. So if we zoom in, you can see here the skin cell, you can see the skin cells, all the lines, individual hairs. And then to finish this, all we have to do is go to the texture layer itself and switch that to linear light. Now, if we turn these 2 layers off, nothing changes, and that's the goal, that's the idea. Now you'll see the benefits of this as we progress through, but to start with, we're going to begin on our colors layer. We just turn our textures off. Okay, now we're just going to put these into a group so it's easier to manage, and we'll start on our colors layer. What we're looking for is just areas of color that doesn't belong. So good example here, very, very common, doesn't matter how fit someone is, there are always lines and things like that we can just sort of alter and adjust. Now we will not be doing any body morphing. It's not something I do. Personally, anyway, I don't like to do that sort of stuff. The times that I will do it is more likely if, for example, there was a piece of material that was pulling tight on the skin, causing a bump that doesn't look as nice. But I wouldn't go around changing the actual figure or shape of the subject in the photo. But that's just personal choice. I prefer to keep things as realistic as possible. So one of the things we can do is we can go on with the lasso tool. We want our soft lasso. I just have it on a feather of 20 pixels. And we could go just a rough, large area like this. And we can then go in and make sure we're on the correct layer first. We then go in and do another Gaussian blur, half of what we did on, between half and the full of what we did originally. And then now with the updated shortcuts, we can just Control Alt F a couple of times to repeat that process, and that softens it out a bit. We can see for this scenario, it's not something that works because it's a larger color change. But there are other areas like around here where applying these filters a couple of times just helps soften and smooth everything a little bit more. So for this one, we can now come in with our, I like to use the patch tool and the healing brush. I don't really like using the spot healing. I'd rather choose myself where the source is. Healing and patching basically is where, for the patch tool, we're selecting an area and asking Photoshop to, or telling Photoshop where to take information from and try and pull it in and blend it in. So we can now remove those lines. I'm just going to switch over to my pen. That's all we're doing, just selecting areas loosely. And every so often, don't forget to hold down the space bar and shift your canvas around a little bit, because your eyes get used to what's in front of you and they stop seeing as much detail. So after looking at this for a while, we'll give it a shift and all of a sudden notice there was a few more spots here and there. And you'll notice I'm not actually taking away any detail, although this obviously is a blurred image. We're not losing anything, we're just replacing areas with other areas that already exist, just taking reference from other color points. So a spot like this is an area you might want to apply another bit of blur on, which will just create this, will make this gradient a little bit smoother. And how picky you want to be on this is realistically comes down to, well, your own personal choice, how much time you want to put into it. The other part is what's the desired result. If this is just going onto Facebook, you only need to spend a minute, or really only a minute doing this. Be selective. Not everything needs to go. So before I do spots like this, I should probably double check and make sure it's not, for example, these are important ones as far as I'm concerned. These are moles that this person lives with and it's part of their identity, especially ones on the face. So things like this, did a bit of a faux pas there and just assumed they were pimples, but things like this, unless I'm asked to remove them, I wouldn't. So say for example, a mole that's up there, mole that's on the neck, those aren't ones, especially distinguishing marks, are ones I wouldn't choose to remove. But that again comes down to your purpose. If your purpose is to do this for a client, then I would absolutely leave them in. If you were doing this for a magazine publication, on the other hand, quite often you'd be taking these out. It all comes down to the purpose. So I've got the texture layer back on now. So you'll see here we had We've removed some of the color. Now we're left with the texture. If we come and do the same thing on the texture layer, it's completely gone. And if we do the opposite, we can take the texture away. Because it's a small one, we can't see it. But as these marks become bigger, shifting them will still leave us with a color detail difference. So a combination of the two. Sometimes we need to do one. That's the other advantage of separating them like this, is that you can do them in a varying degree of aggressiveness, I guess, without having to change what you're doing or how you're thinking about things. Okay, so now we're just looking around for other little areas that we deem necessary to adjust. Okay, so we've got our moles there, leave them. There is a scar here, which we cannot see. Yeah, it's only on the detail layer. And so you can see as I move this around, you will start to notice that we do have shape in this color level. We do have some details, and it's showing you the ups and downs of the skin, pimples and things like that. So what we can do is we'll go back to our lasso with the L key. Let's quickly do that and just hit Control Alt F to redo that blur. Maybe do it twice. Values for this vary, of course, so you can absolutely go in and do that and make it a stronger blur. I like to do it smaller so that it's increments rather than going too far. Too far is never good. Okay, and then the last quick thing we would do is look over the background just on our color layer and see if there's anything here we wanted to change. But I'm perfectly happy with that. We've got a nice easy one to work with today. So now, face is the most important thing in most of these sorts of shots. However, the face is the one you will also probably spend the most time on. I like to rotate how I do these. So if I'm doing quite a few shots of the same individual, I will alternate the order in which I do these. So I'll one image I'll start and focus on the head, and 60-70% of my time will be focused on cleaning up the skin on the face, and then finish off the rest of the body. And then the next shot I'll start from the body and then work my way to the head, just to keep it interesting for yourself, and so that you keep seeing that, keep seeing things fresh. So the main thing we'll be looking at is pimples, scars. We've got goosebumps happening, which in this scenario, because of the type of shot it is, it'd be nicer if we reduced those at the very least. And aging lines, if they're a case. I don't remove things like that, but I would reduce them. We'll start at the face, as it's the most important one. And all we're going to do is on our texture layer here, just make sure you got your texture layer selected. I'm using the patch tool. You could also use the healing brush. It does the same thing. The only difference is the application, and the application is through brush rather than selecting an area. You just hold Alt and click an area that you're sampling from. So let's say I want to take from here and I want to place it here. Simple as that. And then that dot's gone. That one's good too. I just personally prefer to I prefer to use the patch tool because it helps keeps things irregular. So I'm not plonking down circles all over the place. The other reason is because it allows me to see a bit better what I'm putting in, so I can make sure skin cells, so I can see here this stuff's all way too sharp and aggressive to go into that spot, and then as we get here it's starting to be on the wrong angle. It's nice to be able to do that and find something that fits in. Okay, we move it around. We can see there's a little bit of color change there. We can adjust that by coming through and shifting on the color layer. Okay, back to the texture layer, and I will just come through. I think in this case I will remove this because it's only slightly there. Now I'm not going to remove everything, and I also want this. This is, I don't, for me personally, I'm not looking for skin where it all looks like that, because that's just too fake. It's too porcelain. I see a lot of edits that look like that. For me personally, I try and shy away from that. I want it to stay feeling like the actual person. I want it to stay being real. So all I'm here doing is I'm touching up. I'm not airbrushing anything. That term gets used a lot less now, but it was used for a long time in scenarios where it shouldn't have been. So you've got a position or a spot here now where this suddenly looks too clean. I mean, even as it was an area where I think we've got a bit more makeup on there, and things are looking quite smooth, textureless, and everything else is got heaps of texture. So what we could do is, because we're on the color layer, maybe have a look, see if we can find an area of subtle detail that might work. So we just brought a little bit of physicality, a little bit of dimensionality, surface texture to that portion. It's now no longer an odd little clean smudge. Okay, and we can just come through on our texture layer, grabbing bits and pieces. So if you've got a piece in texture, you want to sample from texture. You don't want to sample from flat, because then if you did that, you'd end up with this flat piece in the middle of all your texture. Okay, so we're looking for, we're not worried about color. It's 100%, we're just worrying about the texture itself, where we're getting it from. And there's no need to go overboard. I like, again, I can't repeat it enough, I like my images looking like people, not mannequins. For me, I'm always trying to go for realistic. Sometimes we push the boundaries of a little bit and go try and make things a little bit more punchy, a little bit more powerful, but my goal is still always to keep true to the subject. Now, what we can also do with this, instead of so I wouldn't want to completely remove these areas, the dark shadows you might get, the lines, things like that. We can, instead of patching or healing, we can use a clone stamp and take another area and gently place it on top, so that we reduce the lines. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is better than doing really smooth skin, but my goal, this is, how do I put it? My goal is to, in this scenario, is just to do justice to the individual. For the most part, I'm realistically just editing bits that wouldn't normally be there. So acne is a really good example of that. It's something that just happened to be there on the day. It's not always there. The other thing I'm doing is I'm countering or improving on my lighting setup. So you're in a scenario where you wouldn't, when you normally looked at someone, you wouldn't see all this detail. You wouldn't, because these aren't real light situations. This is in a studio controlled light. I've placed it where I wanted it to be, to optimize certain aspects at a sacrifice of others. But that's what we have these for. Now, something like this, there are times where completely removing this work, and there are times where it doesn't. If you try and go all the way and do something like this, you can see now we have the line. We have a shadow line there, color line, which obviously stands out. Now, if we were to take that away, sometimes it just doesn't look right. So, have a go, see what happens. All right. See, for me, that doesn't quite work. It just starts to look a little bit strange. But I think I think we'll do it. And what we can do is we can counter with our dodging burning process. Okay, so on the color layer. Okay, so you see how I pulled out texture? That's not what we want. We don't want to bring texture into there. Now on it was on the texture layer, not the color layer. Okay. So that works okay. And what we can also do again, switch to the lasso tool, select that area that we've adjusted, and just throw that filter in a couple of times. The Gaussian blur. Control Alt F. Okay, back to texture. Make sure you switch back to the patch tool. And this is also just a rough, loose one. We could really come in and really work the skin, remove the hair and suggestions of hair, all the little pores, but it's not necessary in this scenario, and I think it's still going to come out awesome anyway. So quickly checking again for lines. We have some lines coming through here, but it's okay. What would end up being difficult with something like this is our edges where we get close to other things. So I'm just on the texture layer here, and that's all we're doing. We're replacing it with a smoother texture, but it's not. We're not something that's completely flat. Now this is a unique one, not something that I really have had to deal with before. Okay, we've got to be careful there because we lost our sharpness, so we don't want to go too close to that line. That line is important, but you can see it's still looking like skin. It's still looking pixelated. We'll come back later and clean this bit up. Okay, now you can see this bit of color, just bit of discolorations in there as well. But when you have a look at the thumbnail and you realize how small things are, even the pores there, this whole area is something you're not going to notice the detail on, especially if you were viewing it on your phone or on the internet. Okay, we made it through with that. Now we're going to come back up to the eyes here, and we'll go to our clone stamp. Okay, I'm going to work at around 5% opacity up here, so I just hit 0.5 and increase our brush size with the square bracket. And I just want to pick from here the lighter area and then drag it through. Okay, we can maybe bump up to 10%. It's all going to be different. This one's a nice high detail image, so it needs to be pushed quite a bit down. So we've jumped all the way up to 20, but again, as always, depends on the individual image. I zoom in and out a lot, and I move the canvas a lot just to keep looking at things. So like I said, this is more a personal edit for an individual, where the goal is not to go for clean porcelain skin. It's to keep things realistic, but clean everything up. So even just that little bit of work we've done there, hopefully you can see the difference there. I'll zoom in a bit. Okay, so there's before, after, and a lot of these edits, like my the way I see things is, at the end of the day, you shouldn't really be able to tell that an image was edited, and if that's the case, you've done a good job. You expect people to be a little bit surprised and go, oh wow, okay, that I didn't expect it to be that, to come out that nice. I can understand the assumption of edit just because of how something looks, but it shouldn't be obvious to someone that it's been edited. Not in this scenario. Other scenarios, absolutely, it should be noticeable, but in this particular case, oops. In this particular case, we're wanting to be subtle but effective. Okay, and that's probably that. Nice and simple. We'll just clean up this bit here. Okay, perfect. Okay, so nice and easy. We haven't had to do too much at all, really. And we've covered a lot of space whilst being up close. So that's that skin edit. Won't be noticeable from here. Now for me, I'll go on to a quick dodge and burn stage. So we go to our colors. Over here on the left, we have dodge, which is a little lollipop, and burn, which is the hand sort of pinching. Okay. Now what we're doing with this is we're essentially adding some dimension. So dodging and burning, we're using darker to suggest something's further away, and the highlights to suggest something's closer to us. Which obviously they already exist, we just want to push those a little bit more. Again, this is a nice quick edit. It's not something that really, you know, sitting down, if you weren't talking, doing this, it's a 5-10 minute thing. We've been very lucky in terms of skin. She has great skin, lots of detail, so it makes it nice and easy to come through. Now all we're doing is we're going to set our exposure, our range to midtones, exposure to about 10%, and we're just going to run across the edges on the color layer. Once is enough, that already will make a big difference. So you can already see there, especially if you're looking in this corner here, that has now lifted and gone further up. We can maybe go one more time. Now it's also not doing too much because it's already a dark area. If we switched to midtones so that what we're doing only affects the dark pixels and makes them darker, then we will have a further drop. So now that's a much more obvious shift, but we don't need to do that. Keep it in midtones just to keep it safe, and it means we're not pushing anything too far into black. Oops. Okay, and we're doing the same everywhere else. So we just come around these edges here once, twice. Anywhere where you can see where shape is being shown to you because of the shadow. Okay, so come up the arms, on the inside of the arms there too. So this is pushing, the darker these areas get, the further back they get pushed. So we can darken this neck up. So here we haven't shaped the neck, we've just added depth, added shadow into it. Okay, we're lucky with this one. We do have good armpits. I know that's an odd statement, but armpits quite often can not look very nice at all. And they can be very difficult to edit. Okay, an important one which we don't have to worry about here really, we always want to make sure we've got separation between the jaw and the neck. So on most I would still come through with this dodge and burn and run through here a couple of times just to shape that jaw. Follow that neckline down. Swipe over there, a couple of swipes over the eyebrows just to darken them up a little. And the eye and the mouth there. Okay, so there are subtle differences happening, but that's the key to a lot of it, being subtle. Okay, have a quick look, make sure we're happy with everything. I'm quite happy with the color range we have going on as well, so I'm not going to adjust that. Now that we've done our burning, we're going to switch over to dodging. And it's just the opposite now. We're looking at the highlighted areas, places where light will reflect. We don't want to push them too hard, obviously, because the more we push them, the more plastic things are going to start to look. But you can see there already that leg now, it looks much more three-dimensional. And we just follow that through. Adjusting your brush size appropriate. It's quite simple. It's not a lot of change realistically, but definitely worth it. Gives you a much nicer result. But when you start off with a great shot as well, sometimes you can not do anything. So what we're going to put here now is, I'm happy with that, just basic dodging. We're going to duplicate our color layer twice. Go to the first one and hit Control U for hue saturation. Throw that down to 0, and then Control L. We just want to make sure our image is within the histogram. It's looking good. And I'm going to put that at just 10% for this one. And we're going to change the color one above to soft light at 20%. Oops, nothing selected. Yeah, so that works for this one. Black and white layer at 10%, color layer at 20%. This will be different on different images. You could quite easily, you know, feel free to have a play. You could bump your black and whites to 40. You drop more color, then increase the soft light to counter that. So maybe 30 or 50 or 90. It's all just about your output, what your goal is, what you're trying to create. And this is how I like to do it. Okay, now with our texture, two things we can do. In this particular shot, we have no detail in the eyes. And the eyes are already very sharp. But what I would normally do is with that lasso, with the 20% pixel feather, I come in like with that, whilst the texture layer is selected, and just hit Control J, and that duplicates that sharp, that texture layer on top. And because it's got a blending mode, it's now really punching that sharpness. And then I would normally drop it to between 25 and 50. Sorry, the layer we duplicated, and that's purpose is just to bring a little bit more attention to the eyes. Another thing we could do in here, just with the brush, on a nice soft edge, nice and big. I like to do these sort of vignettes by hand because you can shape it how you want. And then, you know, just have a look, maybe see what overlay looks like, soft light, or just set it at multiply and drop your opacity down. And it's all we're doing is looking for things to help focus in on our subject in the center there. Okay, so when you look at the image straight away, it doesn't feel like much, but when you compare it to the old one, you know, there's an obvious difference here. And yeah, that's basically it for a basic quick edit in Photoshop for one of your shots where you're dealing with a lot of skin. The majority of your time is spent just selecting and shifting across, and we still end up with a really good look, really nice look. And we end up with an image that looks great, and would easily be, people could easily assume that that's how it was shot, you know, no editing, nothing like that. And that's the goal. That's what we want. We want high quality work that is on the download. So that's you know, with the talking, but I probably would have cut it up as well. That's taken me 15-20 minutes. Really, that's a 5-10 minute job per image. So you can bust out 5 or 6 of those in an hour and be done, and you're good. But I think it's really important to, even if you're not shooting this sort of subject matter, skin can become tiring and tedious. Doing a few shots like this every so often to edit really boosts your speed really fast. And this simple is more than enough. This simple method is much more than enough to still produce high quality work. So hopefully that was helpful. Feel free to ask any questions you can think of. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll be posting hopefully one of these every week for a while, just to start building up some of this content. We'll be doing a lot of new shoots soon as well, and hopefully posting some videos from the shoots themselves too. But I encourage you guys to edit along with me, keep shooting, and practice as much as you can, because that speed, just that repetition, getting that little bit of speed makes it a lot more fun and makes you much more driven to do more, and you can get much more work done. So and it definitely leads to more creativity, more options. While you're shooting, you'll start thinking of, if you come across a problem in the real world, there are plenty of cases where once you've edited enough, you'll start looking at those scenarios and going, you know what, we don't have to worry about that. We can solve this on the computer afterwards without too much effort. But yeah, keep practicing. Thanks for watching, and catch you later.